Hello and welcome to another edition of Parlay by the Hindu. Today we will be discussing whether US imperialism is a threat to the world. During the 12-day war in West Asia, launched by Israel aiming at stopping Iran from having nuclear weapons, the US struck 3 nuclear facilities in Iran in violation of international laws. This unprovoked strike is the latest in a series of unilateral military interventions by the US across the world, including the illegal occupation of Iraq under the pretext of possible weapons of mass destruction and the occupation of Afghanistan. While the US remains a hub of innovation, their interventions have a destabilizing effect in other regions of the world. Today, we have Prakash Karat, former General Secretary of the Communist Party of India Marxist, and Happymon Jacob, founder and director of Council for Strategic and Defense Research in New Delhi and author, to discuss the issue. I will hand over the mic to our experts with the question, how is present-day US pushing its imperialist agenda? Mr. Karat, if you would like to reply.
I think that the background to this present effort by President Trump is the decline in US hegemony that has been taking place over a period of time, and also the crisis of neoliberalism, which has affected the United States and all the other advanced capitalist countries. So it is in this background that we are seeing the efforts being made by Trump with his slogan of America First, his effort to squeeze even his allies and trying to revive the US dominance and hegemony, which is so important for him.
And Mr. Happymon.
Right. Thank you. And I totally agree with what Mr. Karat has said. Although I'd sort of term it as the American hegemony, which has been under challenge for some time. This is a world's sole superpower at this point of time engaged in an aggressive military behavior against regimes and countries that it has issues with. The United States is violating the international order that it helped create in 1945, the laws of that particular order that it put in place in 1945. But I think I would also say that the United States is actually behaving like any country that accumulates so much power. It is engaging in a behavior that pursues what it believes are its interests because it can, because it has so much power. It's a hyperpower. This is how superpowers have behaved globally and regional powers have behaved regionally in the past, in history. I'm not condoning it. It is not acceptable. But I think that's how hegemons behave. In some ways, the Trump administration's use of power is not even well calculated towards an end. It is just random and reckless in some ways. Other countries have done that in the past. And I think if in imbalanced international systems, countries will continue to do that in future. If another power becomes a superpower tomorrow, and if there is nothing that is stopping that power, either international law, the United Nations, or other powers balancing it, then those countries are likely to repeat something like this. So while I see the United States' pursuit of hegemony and its random and behavior in the international system, attacking other countries, I don't see this as an exception. I see this as something that unchecked hyperpowers tend to engage in internationally, historically, and today, and perhaps going forward.
So, this unchecked power, do you think this US's dominance can be threatened by the advances made by China in areas such as renewables and electronics?
So, in the context of the decline of American power, the corollary of this is the rise of China's economic power, its technological prowess, and its global political influence. I think that you have to see the efforts that Trump is making. It didn't start with Trump, of course, for quite some time now, during the Biden presidency and from the time of President Obama. The United States has been focused on how to meet this strategic rival or threat from China. And that is, I think, what is also impelling much of the actions of President Trump today and also earlier of the Biden presidency. So the rise of China definitely is seen as a threat by the United States of America.
I tend to agree with that. I think in general, there has been a structural decline in the American power. The decline in American power is in relative terms because of the rise of other powers, primarily by China. The United States today is a $30 trillion economy. China is a $20 trillion economy. There are no other countries which are close to either of these two in some way. So I think the United States certainly is rattled by the rise of China and the decline of its own power internationally. So there is a structural rivalry, or let's say what some people call a new Cold War brewing. While that is true, I think the difficulty with that argument is that today what the Trump administration is doing is not really in keeping with that sort of structural rivalry that the Americans sort of perceived during the Obama administration or the Joe Biden administration thereafter. If the United States under Trump believed that China is the principal contradiction or that China is the primary threat, they would have behaved differently. The fact that the Americans today under Trump are engaged in a reckless sort of show of power or reckless sort of international behavior has alienated many of their allies in Europe and other places, and even in Asia for that matter. And therefore, while I do agree that there is a structural rivalry between the two, today that what the Trump administration is doing is perhaps not in keeping with that. But having said that, let me also make an argument that if tomorrow there is a consensus between the United States and China about how the two great powers must behave internationally, this is going to create difficulties for other rising powers, such as India. Say, for example, we saw during the Cold War years, the Soviet Union and the United States had a certain G2 understanding between the two of them. And that also meant they had their own respective spheres of influence. And if there is a G2 today between an emerging China and the superpower United States, it's going to land countries like India in trouble because they're going to be they'll probably have less agency in the sort of international system on the global stage. So while a Cold War between the United States and China may not be palatable for countries like India, a great power agreement between the two of them can also be problematic for countries, emerging powers like India.
May I just make a point here? I think that Trump's, what Mr. Jacobs said about his unstructured sort of interventions and actions do not seem to make much sense today. But I still think that for the American ruling classes as a whole, I think they will find the threat of China, how to meet the threat of China will become the central focus again. Trump now, as far as the Ukraine war is concerned and Europe is concerned, he has now, as you know, the recent NATO summit, he has got all his European allies, the NATO allies, to agree to a 5% increase in the defense budget or military expenditure, 5% of the GDP. And he's not going to have any stakes now as far as Ukraine is concerned, as far as the war is concerned. And I think that Trump's advisors, all his key advisors, I think are mainly going to now focus on China. Just the opening salvo of that was, of course, the tariff wars which started. They find it difficult to pursue that because China has stood firm. It has not succumbed to the tariff threats, and therefore they've had some sort of understanding now, but it may be still temporary. But I think that the Trump administration will start shifting their focus to the Asia-Pacific region, or what is called the Indo-Pacific region. And I think the not conflict, but at least the rivalry between the United States and China will become, I think, one of the key features or main features in the coming days. Yes, of course, I can't rule out some sort of entente between the Trump administration and China. That is possible. But I think that more and more, given the type of geopolitical situation we are facing, the rise of China is the only alternative pole, and America will try to continue to do something to contain China. So I think that Trump, with all his unpredictability, eventually will, I think, direct America towards having this competition or rivalry with China.
I think Mr. Karat has a point there in the sense that Trump is there going to be there only till 2028. The default common sense of the United States government and its security establishment will be to checkmate the rise of China. To that extent, the rivalry or the Cold War between the two sides is over time going to increase and not really going to decrease. To that extent, I totally agree with that. On the issue of Ms. Karat also mentioned the issue of the alternative of the other pole as opposed to just having one pole in the international system, which is the American unipolarity. I think the problem with having two poles, which is the US-led pole and the China-led pole, is that, as I said earlier, smaller countries like or rising powers like India or Brazil or South Africa, these countries tend to have a little lesser and lesser agency under a bipolar sort of international order. I think for us, when I sit in Delhi and look at the world, for me, what probably is more useful is a multipolar world order in which you have more consensus building, in which you have more conversations happening. UN is not overruled by countries with more power like the United States. So while great power consensus is a problem for countries like India, great power competition is also going to be a problem for us. So I think it's not an easy, at least the way I see it, easy choice as far as we are concerned. It's going to be more contested and more chaotic as sort of time as the years go by.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Jacob that what is good for India would be a growing multipolarity, and we playing a role within that multipolar world. But the reality today is that at present, India has got more and more aligned with the United States, whether it is through the Quad or whether it is through our economic and defense ties, which we are now strengthening with the United States of America. So if we had been able to have a more independent policy, foreign policy, and retain our strategic autonomy, then we would have been able to take full advantage of this growing multipolarity. But we are not, what we are seeing today, just now after the United States bombed Iran, its nuclear installations, and before that, Israel's attack on Iran, we found that India has refused to even condemn these attacks, which is against international law. Iran is a member of the NPT, Israel is not. Iran, as you know, was in talks with the United States before Israel launched its attack. But India distanced itself even from a statement from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization condemning Israel's attack on Iran. So we are getting clearly aligned with the United States and Israel, what was happening in the Middle East today. So in that situation, already India has got more or less tied up or aligned with the United States and Israel. So in that situation, we are not in a position to take advantage of any growing multipolarity in the world today. I think that aspect also has to be kept in mind.
Sorry, I think that is Mr. Karat is right on the issue of multipolarity and non-alignment. But let me sort of on the U.S. relationship with the United States, India's relationship with the United States. Let me sort of pitch in, and I would say that there are two schools of thought. There is a school of thought which, as Mr. Karat articulated, which is that we're getting perhaps a bit too close for comfort with the United States and getting too aligned with the United States, which is probably not going to be a good idea for a country like India. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought, I just read this article by Mr. Ashley Tellis in Foreign Affairs, where he makes the argument that the United States is not going to help India in future because India is seeking multipolarity and is not aligning itself to the US-led unipolar world, and it is not helping the United States to checkmate China in the region. So my own view is somewhere in between. I think when I look at the United States and the utility of the United States in terms of India's security is concerned, we have a country which is next door, which has territorial claims vis-a-vis India, which we have had conflicts and clashes in the past, which is China. So if you have a challenge next door, you may need friends, and that could be Russia, that could be the United States, that could be France. So if you do not have those friends, your ability to meet your own security needs is going to be somewhat suspect. Now, on the question of the Indian voting pattern, especially on the question of Iran, the problem really again is who is going to stand by you when you are in a situation of insecurity. At the end of the day, in an anarchic international system, states do look after and have to look after their own security. Now, so if I am convinced that the global South or the SCO or the BRICS countries are going to stand by me and support me militarily, diplomatically, and politically when I'm in trouble tomorrow with Pakistan or with, say, China or whoever, then I'm going to sort of support them. But if I know that another country is going to support me, then I'm likely to abstain or support, or one of those options. The reality is that when we had the when we had the Pahalgam attack recently, and the stand-up with Pakistan thereafter, not too many countries stood by India. Now, some people say that is because India is too multi-aligned, and therefore nobody stood by you. Israel, in that case, it appears that stood by you. Now, this is not to condone the excesses and the massacre of innocent civilians that Israel has committed in Gaza, and the sort of attack on Iran, which is against international law. But at the end of the day, the question I think we should ask is also who is going to stand by you when you are in trouble in your own neighborhood.
Yes, I think that's a valid concern, but what our recent experience shows is that despite our having such close ties now with the United States of America, after the Pahalgam incident and our recent 4-day conflict with Pakistan on that issue, we saw the stand of the United States and Trump was that we intervened to settle matters and bring about a ceasefire. So the United States of America will start looking at you or treating you just like an ally, like it has always had Pakistan as an ally. So this is one of the risks that you have of trying to align yourself with the geopolitical interests of the United States in Asia. You have become a member of the Quad. And if they start upgrading Quad into a security alliance, then what I'm saying is that India's capacity or opportunities in a multipolar world gets shrunk, gets tied down. That is my concern. Yeah.
So I would like to ask, India's multi-alliance agenda, what you can say that an agenda, this India's effort to be non-aligned and having alliances with multiple factors, multiple sectors, how will it affect the role or the effect of BRICS and SCO, the groupings that can pose a challenge to US's imperialist agenda, especially, but it's centered around China. So how will India's non-aligned notion would it give more power to US's authority by breaking down these BRICS or whatever the alliances?
Let me start with that question, if that's okay. I think in some ways what the United States said during the recent conflict that India had with Pakistan was clearly not in favor of India. For that matter, what the Europeans said or what even Russia said was not in favor of India. In some ways, therefore, one could make the argument that they are probably returning the argument that India made when the Russia-Ukraine war happened. India did not really support Russia wholeheartedly. India did not support the United States or its allies in Europe. So they're all giving India back the logic that India used against them, which is this is not the age of war, this is not an era of war. So that's what in some ways that's probably what multi-alignment did first. Just on the question of the BRICS, SCO, etc. My own sense is that when it comes to a country, it has a ranking of its interests and priorities. The most important priority, of course, in an anarchic international system is the security of that country. Once that is assured, then of course you can talk about the other issues such as the international order. We can talk about international law. There are all other things that should be talked about. But I think there should be a the ranking of the prioritization of interests. Now, when I look at SCO, SCO is a China-dominated sort of entity in some ways, and India and China are not the best of friends. The BRICS, for example, it has now expanded to such an extent that the countries within BRICS don't agree with each other on most issues. It was more compact earlier. It was more results driven earlier. While I am all for multiple entities in the international system that can offset and balance unipolarity and hegemony, I'm also concerned about jumping on the bandwagon of too many of these, which may not necessarily lead to anything. I think we need to have clear-cut and clearly articulated interest behind being part of some of these institutions and organizations. But back to you.
Yeah, I agree that the SCO is not a regional body which will be of much great use to us, but it is also it's something which we cannot be out of, because Pakistan would have gotten. They came along with us finally. I think both of us became members at the same time, so we'd have been shut out of a body which, after all, has some significance in this Central Asian region. But as far as BRICS is concerned, I think that it has better potential. You're right. When it was just 5 members, it was a more compact body. Now it is expanded. But it shows that there is a potential for the global south to get some sort of collective forum or body which can articulate the interests, notwithstanding the fact that you're right, many of the countries may not have commonality of interest in all issues. But my point is that if you're in BRICS, when a country which is a member of the BRICS gets attacked, is subject to aggression, you should at least take a stand and say, no, we are against this. You can't say we are neutral. We'll say exercise restraint. Iran is being bombed and you say you should exercise restraint, you see. So what I'm saying is, if you want to really make these forums represent the minimum interests of these countries as global south countries, then at least on such issues of attack on territorial sovereignty, or etc., you should be able to take a stand, not go by that's what I said, when you have an alignment, a strategic alignment with one of the big powers, your role, you claim to be a spokesperson for the global south, that gets completely undermined. I was making it from that point of view, that you make it the correct point that we must be able to take advantage of multipolarity. So my contention is that our strategic ties with the United States hampers this India's great potential and role that it can play in a multipolar world.
Yeah. I would also like to talk about Global South a bit more. How did the idea of Global South emerge by the context of US imperialism? Is it like an opposition, a natural opposition to the US's authority, or is it more like a collateral or byproduct that emerged from the US's authority? And how will it be? What role will it play in going forward, especially with Trump's agenda of reciprocal tariffs and such? Will it consolidate an opposition, or will it be an innocent bystander?
No, so just quickly on the Global South argument. I mean, I think this is clearly a political sentiment, a political argument that has come out of the post-colonial states, in the 1960s and 70s and the 80s. Today, a lot of countries look back at the Global South, the re-emergence of Global South, as it were, and say, hey, the Global South must be retired. It has no place in today's world. There is not even a definition that can sort of bring these varied countries together. And I think they're completely wrong, because the Global South today, in my opinion, is as important and and as relevant as it was probably in the 1980s or 1990s. I don't think one should look for a geographical sort of space where Global South exists or a clear tight definition of the Global South. I think we should look for what the Global South countries are arguing or stating. If you look at, say, for example, the three Global South virtual summits that India organized, and look at their the statements that came out of the global summits, many of these are very, very germane and relevant to the Global South countries. They're talking about debt restructuring. They're talking about climate adjustment funding. They're talking about the restructuring of the international institutions, etc., etc. So I think these forums and the arguments made by Global South must be heard by the global north, by the Western countries, developed countries, and countries like India must be a part of these forums. I totally disagree with anyone who makes the argument that Global South must be retired. But back to you on that.
Yeah, I think we are running out of time. The recording shows 3 minutes left, so I think we can conclude with Mr. Karat's idea on what Global South will face going forward.
Right now, Trump's America First policies and his now tariff aggression, what is going to be the net result of this? China can look after its interests. It has shown that it will not succumb to the tariff war or threats from the United States of America. We have seen how firmly they've rebuffed it. But what is going to actually happen is, whether it's the reciprocal tariffs or the whole trade war that Trump is launching, the real victims are going to be the poorer countries, the countries of the Global South. Most of them are going to get really badly affected. The economies are going to suffer. There's going to be loss of jobs, and they're going to face serious financial problems. So the burden of Trump's America First is going to fall on the poorer countries, the Global South countries. So I think that in the coming days, India should be part of this mainstream Global South resistance, which will develop, I'm sure, in the coming days. Mr. Jacob talked about the debt crisis. Now the trade crisis is going to add to that. So in the coming days, India must be able to work out a clear strategy to be part of the mainstream Global South trends, whether it's the debt crisis, whether it's trade, whether it is climate change. All these things are going to get aggravated in the coming days due to the policies being adopted by the Trump administration.
Just to add one point to what Mr. Karat said, and rightly so, I think at an age, in an age where you have multilateralism failing, the UN-led organizations are really finding it hard to survive. You need alternatives. And I think mini-lateralisms and alternatives of this kind, Global South, they have a responsibility to come together, talk about the issues that much of the humanity faces, and sort of do something about it. So the failure of multilateralism is another reason why Global South must survive.
That was an interesting conversation. That was an insightful conversation. And yeah, we have a lot to look forward to how the world is shaping up, or how the world is reshaping itself under Trump's agenda, and how it will be going forward. Thank you, both of you, Mr. Karat and Mr. Jacob, for taking your time and sharing your thoughts with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.